Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hellion Rebellion Rock and Roll Association, brought to you by the one and only Hollygeist. Before we get started, we have moments of silence to recognize tonight. The first one goes out to Vivian Westwood. She was a punk rock fashion designer, part of the whole sex shop, Malcolm McLaren's sex shop, part of the Sex Pistols entourage. If I'm not mistaken, she was either married to Malcolm McLaren or she had a child with him. But after the Sex Pistols and all that, she would go on to continue to do her fashion thing. The other moment of silence we need to recognize, this one I found out 5-6 hours ago, was Fred White from Earth, Wind, and Fire. He was the drummer, I believe. So let's go ahead and get our silence on before we get into the rock and roll. Okay. May Vivian Westwood and Fred White find funk and fashion coalescing in perfect harmony in the confines of heaven. So yeah, I'm mad as hell right now. Mad as hell. Somebody stole a catalytic converter off my car last night, and just filled with rage. But I got to keep the rock and roll going. And I mean, what do you do when you're filled with so much anger and hate? I mean, do I drive around the city like some jacked up, crazy, rage-filled zombie monkey looking for somebody to shoot? I hope not. I mean, people get shot in this city every damn day. And trust me, I ain't the one. Don't let me catch you. I guarantee you. I guarantee. So what do we do? Or I'll tell you what I do. I get about 2 to 10 of these, and I get some extreme metal, and I crank it up, and I chug those down, and it seems to calm me. And it could be for anything. You know, you have a bad day at work, the girl you asked out rejected you, the wife and kids are yelling at you. Just find a place to go, crank up the death metal, get you 2 to 20 of those, and just try to keep the peace and keep on going, because you're not going to win. So I started the new year off with some black metal. Let's keep this heavy metal train rolling. We're going to do a little death metal today. And the band I'm going to talk about is the legendary Floridian death metal band Death. Death has always been one of my favorite death metal bands, if not metal bands. They got their start in the late 80s in Altamont Spring, Florida. They would do some time in the Bay Area and a very short amount of time in Canada. I can't remember which city. Until they would move back to Altamont Springs. Then eventually, finally, with the right people, they put out their first record, Scream Bloody Gore. Again, I've said this before, death metal in the late 80s, early 90s, if you weren't tape trading with people in your nation or around the world, you could not access this kind of music. You really had to be getting demos and things like that. Um, the major labels did not want to pick this music up. Even the independent labels were just shied away from it. They didn't know how to react to this. I think it had a lot to do with fear. It had a lot to do with maybe there were just attitudes of people who thought this was a phenomenon or a trend and it would go away in a few years. Um, but sooner or later, the uh, the dam would break, and there would be a few independent labels who would start putting out death metal bands. Most notably would be Earache out of. They would be dealing with a lot of the European bands. There would be Combat, which Death was originally on, out of the United States, and then there would be this label, Roadrunner Records, would be one of the another American label who would start putting out death metal records. Roadrunner to this day is still an independent label. In Europe, I believe they're called Road Racer, and I know they're also affiliated with RC Records, which RC, I know Sepultura put out a lot of their music on RC. But Roadrunner, what can I say? I mean, they're a staple in the heavy metal world to this day, and they're still, like I said, they're not incorporated, affiliated with anybody else but themselves, which is that's an achievement. Uh, Roadrunner would put out these comps called At Death's Door. The one I have here is At Death's Door 2, and this would be a way to cheaply buy death metal music and check it out. The band Death, like I said, they got their start on Combat Records. They did, I think they only did one record with Roadrunner. There was some kind of falling out between them and the management, and that's what happened there. Death is a metalhead's band. Death is a metal band's metal band. They started the death metal thing, arguably. Some people claim it was the grindcore bands of England, like Napalm Death, Terrorizer. If you got your hands on a Nihilist demo, some people claim Nihilist was the first death metal band. And if you have one of those demos, on a side note, those things are worth a lot of money. Some people believe Possessed is the first death metal band because of their song Death Metal on the Seven Churches record. And there's no doubt that Possessed coined the term death metal. But when the band Death came out, my friends and I, we didn't know who Possessed was. That was still kind of alien to us. But when bands after Death showed up, like Obituary, Morbid Angel, Deicide, Cannibal Corpse, you know, if somebody asked us, what does this band sound like? We'd just, have you ever heard the band Death? It sounds like them. We kind of lumped that all into thrash music until there was a term for it. So, yeah, and Death, like I said, they're a metalheads band. Every album was different than the last album. They just got more and more progressive as the years wore on. They would rock the nation up until about 2000, 2001, Chuck Schuldiner, who was the only main person in the band, he would end up getting brain tumors, and they would take his life in 2001, and that was a pretty sad time because there was no more death records coming out. And if you were into this kind of music, or even if you weren't into this kind of music, you were always interested in what Death was going to do next. And all these progressive death metal bands, avant-garde black metal bands, whatever, they owe a lot to this band, to the band Death. So yeah, there you go. There's a little history on this band. They're a great band. The song that's on this is a cover, and I'm going to play another cover for you. And they are going to be doing Kiss's God of Thunder, which, again, even though this is kind of commonplace now, back in when this came out, 91, 92, death metal bands didn't cover classic hard rock bands. If you heard a cover, it was probably Slayer or Possessed or Discharge or like some crusty punk or something. That's what they would cover. They weren't covering Kiss and Ted Nugent, Aerosmith or whatever. But Death, being on the cutting edge that they weren't afraid to do this sort of thing. Okay, the second part to my video, and why this video is going to be a little bit longer than it should be, is that I got an offer by Mr. Garage Geek. Subscribe to his show if you haven't. He has a really cool show. He collects a little bit of everything. He likes to talk about it. But he does these videos called the Cullings or whatever. I know he's doing one on thrash metal right now. He contacted me and wanted me to show him my top 10 must listens, punk rock bands and songs. The biggest punk rock songs. If you're not familiar with punk rock, then these are the songs you need to hear. I'm not gonna talk about the Sex Pistols, the Clash. I mean, all these big songs. I'm gonna look at this like these are the bands and these are the songs that got me into punk rock, and I'm more of a second to third generation punk rock guy. So because we could talk about London Calling and Nevermind the Bollocks, all the classic punk rock stuff that are must listens. But the way I'm approaching this is I'm just going to show you what got me into buying punk rock. So I hope you're happy with that, Garage Geek. If not, then take it for what it is. Love your channel. And let's go ahead and listen to Death, because this is an amazing song. So there you go. There's the legendary Death doing Kiss's God of Thunder. Great cover. Yeah, I love to hear death metal bands do stuff like that. Especially in the early 90s, which was very uncommon. Testament to Death just being on the cusp and the cutting edge of what they were doing. So there you go. And to Garage Geek, those were my 10 punk rock songs, punk rock bands that got me into punk rock and listening to the genre. Take it for what you will. Hopefully some of these songs and bands make your punk rock culling list. And other than that, I hope everybody else has a good evening. Try not to let the rage get to you. If you need a little help, listen to shit like that. Sometimes it'll calm you down. Alright, love you. I'll see you next time.